Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man. So I went ahead and decided I was going to get a game with the current tournament leader, Viswanathan Anand, versus Magnus Carlsen, taking out around 5. This is the Armageddon game. So I'll have to double check, make sure I got that thumbnail correct. I'm pretty sure I put that right. Okay. Yeah, so like I said, I went ahead and grabbed their game, stepped away from Wesley. So I pretty much covered, his games for today and one of his past games. So I figured, why not branch off? Also, I had a recent comment. Somebody was asking that I only cover Wesley. So I was like, man, let me go ahead and pop one of these games in there. But of course, for all my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay hi to you. Hello ulit. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Anybody who is coming from southern India, most specifically Chennai, I will say vanakkam to you. Nandri, for coming by and taking a look at my video. I really appreciate it. Anybody who is coming from Norway, I will say God Morgan, velkommen, and tusen tak for coming by and taking a look at my video. I really appreciate it. Let me say, yeah, velkommen. Yeah, I said that correctly. But if you guys are ready to go, let's take a look. Let me touch that down. Let's take a look and see what we have for this game. So we got e4, e5, knight comes to f3. We got knight to c6, bishop to c4. Knight comes to f6. We do have d3. And then we have bishop to c5. So we have the Giuoco Pianissimo variation. So it's a quiet game. But very quiet game. But, as you guys always know, it's very rare for you to see one of these games end up in a draw, even though it is called the very quiet game. So we do see bishop to g5. We do see bishop back to e7. Just defending, that knight, unpinning the queen. We do see knight to c3. We got d6. We see a4. We're pretty much just saying we want some space over here. We're not looking for any, a6, b5s to come. And we are just super duper solid on the b5 square. So we do have castles by black. And then we do have the novelty of the game, a5. Vichy is just saying, hey, man, I want all the space you could give me on this side of the board. Like, I want this whole side. And he's not in any danger, even though his king is in the center, because the position is somewhat closed. So as you guys are probably familiar, when the position is somewhat closed or fully closed, you have a lot more time to get castled because there isn't going to be a whole lot of tactical, stuff going on in the middle of the board. So you do have more time to castle. But if you do play those games that are crazy open, do castle immediately. Do not allow yourself to get stuck in the center of the board and have a game of the century played against you. Don't do that. So we do see bishop to g4. We got h3, bishop takes f3, queen takes f3. And as you can see, pretty much both sides have done what they needed to do. White is prepared to castle. Almost guaranteed they're going to castle queen side or king side because they are not going to want to put their king over here because they just pushed this pawn like a million miles up the board. So the knight does come to d4, and this is a really nice outpost for this knight. Because c3 was not played, this allowed the knight to hop down to d4, and it is attacking our queen. So we got queen back to d1. We see c6. We got castles by white. We got b5. And you can play en passant, but that does kind of give away your space. And it just kind of activates black. En passant, you're probably going to be looking at... you could look at queen takes or pawn takes, getting everything hooked up over here on this side, opening this file up. Oh, bam. Okay. And so we do see bishop back to a2. We do see knight to e6 in the position. And you got to be kind of careful because I don't know how many of you think this pawn is looking kind of juicy, but we are looking at check. So do not throw your queen away for no reason. The knight comes back to e6, attacking the bishop. So we do see bishop back to e3. And like I said before, this is, even though you have kind of plugged up that check, you are still looking at this. So be very careful, when you put your queen opposite a rook and there is a bishop in front of it, because it can get kind of sad. You don't want to cry a river. So we do have a6. We got queen back to f3. We see queen down to d7. Knight down to e2, we got d5. You know, you have to try to, you know, push something in the center of the board because, you know, white has their nice little pawn center established. So you got to try to open some lines and get some stuff rolling for your pieces. So we do see c3, just trying to slow that down a little bit. Bishop comes to c5. We got pawn taking d5, pawn taking d5, bishop taking c5, knight taking c5, and then we do have a d4. You know, just tossing an attack on this knight because it is placed pretty nicely. But Magnus Carlsen finds a really nice in-between move, a Zwischenzug move, and it is e4. You know, you're attacking my knight, but bro, I'm going to attack your queen. So, I mean, you know, which one is more important to you? So, you know, of course, the queen, you know, is going to be more important. And it was funny because Anish Giru was like, why don't you just sack right here on f6? You can sack with the queen, the pawn takes back, and then you take here and you got a bunch of pieces. But, I mean, you know, it's just not looking the greatest. But he was, of course, joking. So, I mean, he wasn't being serious. So we did see queen sidestep over to e3. We see knight down to d3. You know, this was a very useful move because now you just kind of have this knight in your kitchen. And it is tickling this pawn over here. You guys hear me talk all the time about ticklish pieces. This one is ticklish. Ha ha. Tickle it, whatever. Anyway, all right, so we do have queen down to d2. You had rook, you know, rook a to b1. That was a possibility as well. You do have to kind of be careful in these positions because this a pawn, you know, can become a target because it is kind of up there by itself at the moment. So we do see rook a to e8. We got f3, just trying to undermine the protection of this knight. And we see a really kind of like cute, sneaky move, and that is knight to f2. Now, it might look kind of strange upon first glance, and I'm not going to lie. It looked kind of strange to me when I first saw it. I was like, what? Knight to f2? I'm like, that just doesn't... But, I mean, then you thought about it, you're like, wait a minute, okay, yeah. Because if rook takes, you have d3. If king takes, you have an even, like, more disastrous e3, because now you're going to have to give the queen away. So, you don't want to go into that. So, we actually see f takes, pawn takes e4, and then we do have knight taking e4, attacking the queen yet again, and then we do see queen to d3. And I mean, black is actually the one that's in the driver's seat in this position. You know, they have their pieces developed. Their knights are good. You know, they don't have any danger on their king, even though this is a half open f-file. You know, and this bishop is actually kind of like biting on a rock because right now the knight is covering this square and the queen is as well. And so this bishop is not the absolute best. So you really want to kind of like, you know, redirect your bishop somewhere that's a little bit more active. So then you can kind of claim that you got a little bit of something going on. So we do see queen down to d6. Rook goes up to f3. We got g6. And an important note, even though you did play g6, you are not worried about dark squared weaknesses because this knight is probably never going to get to g5. And also this is a light squared bishop. So, you know, when you are trying to decide what type of luft to give your king, you know, in front of your king, the pawns, you know, try to take, you know, pay attention to what your opponent has as far as bishops are concerned, or if a knight can cause you some problems with weakening that color complex. I think, you know, beginner, even up to intermediate, sometimes, you know, you make pawn moves and you're just thinking, man, I'm just going to give myself luft. And you're not really thinking about the ramifications of somebody having a certain bishop or maybe a knight being able to kind of hop into a certain weak square type situation. So you have to always be keeping that stuff in mind. It'll definitely help you in your games. So we do see rook a to f1. Now, something I will note in this position or in this game at this point, Magnus Carlsen is down a lot of time. He only has about a minute, maybe a minute 15 at this point of the game. So, I mean, he definitely kind of didn't switch from classical mode to blitz mode. And so that is something that's kind of hurting him just a little bit. But, I mean, maybe like Alexander Grischuk, he has the ability to start playing some bullet. We do see knight over to h5. We got g4. And then the knight just goes back to f6. So we pretty much just wasted moves for black. And, I mean, we kind of got a little bit of, you know, space for white. So we do see knight to f4. We see knight back to g5. Rook 3 goes to f2. We do see knight g to e4. We see rook over to g2 because why not put it opposite the king? Can never hurt. We do see h6. We got h4. We got G5, but this is like kind of weakening your king just a little bit. It's giving you know, your opponent the ability to start to attack a weakness, which is what Viswanathan Anand creates. We see pawn taking G5, pawn taking G5, and then knight down to H3. You know, we do have some weaknesses here where a rook can come in. This knight is on this pawn. Maybe we can, like, you know, move queen over, hit this pawn as well. So we definitely have some things, you know, getting worked up for white. We do see king down to G7, but we have rook to F5, like I said a minute ago. We see rook over to H8. Knight takes G5, so we're grabbing us a pawn. And then we do see rook down to H4. And we have actually reached a point in the game that there is a really nice move that Anand finds in this position. And it basically, so what you're trying to do as black, you know, you have this F2 square covered by this knight. And of course, you know, you can't really do anything about this knight because this other knight will take, and then you're pretty much just renewing the threat. But you do want to move a rook over to H8, and then you just basically just want to checkmate black on H1. So that is what black is trying to get in. So Anand throws a complete wrench in that. So like I said, if you want to pause the video and see what move Anand comes up with to make all of that null and void, go ahead and pause the video and do so. Okay, so yeah. Some of you guys might have noticed that this bishop is kind of all by itself over here. You know, like, hey, can I join? Can I play too? Like, I mean, I'm way over here. And so this pawn is actually pretty loose. You know, this pawn is protecting this knight. So what you want to think about is moves that might undermine the defense of a piece. And bishop to taking D5 would do that. So of course, if you saw bishop takes D5, then you would be a super gangster. But what this does is you do not have time to move the rook over here because you are just going to be taking a bunch of pieces over here like so. And you don't have the rook to H1 checkmate that you were really hoping that you had. So that is the major thing. So like I said, we did see bishop taking a D5, and this put Magnus in a little bit of a pickle. You know, you have to try to figure out like exactly what you're going to be doing with this position, because as of right now, this knight is completely under defended. You know, this pawn has just been removed. So like, how do you take it back? Like, what do you do, right? So we actually see knight taking G5, and then we see rook taking G5 with check. And so it was really crucial that that rook got on F5 like it did. The king stepped back to F8, and then, you know, Vichy thought for a little while. There is one move that pretty much just kind of like seals the deal for the position, and that move is queen to G3. And you're basically forcing a trade of queens because this rook is currently undefended. So you're going to have to take here. And then after the queen takes, the rook takes. I mean, you don't really want to do something like this because, you know, you're literally just down 2 pawns. But we did not see that in the game. After the king came back to F8, Vichy played bishop to F3. And this actually allows black to just have just straight equality. But like I said, Magnus Carlsen is down some pretty severe time. So, you know, it's really tough for him to try to, you know, find these types of moves. So the queen does come to F4, so that is correct. The rook goes over to E5. We see rook takes E5, pawn takes E5, queen takes E5, and then we have king up to F2. We got rook to H3, and then we do have G5. You know, Anand is just figuring, you know what I'm saying, let me try to drum up some counterplay with this pawn. You know, the knight is going to have to jump pretty much somewhere, and you have G6. You're opening the position up quite a bit. Your bishop is defended, so you're good to go there. So you don't have to really worry about your king too much. The knight does come over to H5. We see G6, like I said. The pawn takes. We do see queen up to D8 with check. But unfortunately, this is, you know, allowing white to gain this pawn. The queen does come back to E8, blocking. Queen takes E8, king takes E8, and then we do see rook to G6. And that A5 move that we saw way early in the game literally is like about to shine right now because this is a completely backward pawn that is just like free for the taking. So we do see knight to f4 trying to counterattack on that rook. But, I mean, like I said, the rook is just going to be moving anyway. So the rook takes on a6, and we're literally just starting to clear all the pawns off the board. The knight does check on d3. We see king to e3. And then we see the move that completely ends the game, and that is knight up to e5. Like I said, I mean, I think Magnus had about 2 or 3 seconds at this point. So he was playing on 2 or 3 seconds for about 3 or 4 moves. And so he just probably just calculated, hey, man, I'm going to be pinning this piece. Even though you do have this if you do want to protect this way, but that's not completely winning. Rook to e6 check is completely winning because you are going to be picking up this knight next move. And this pawn doesn't really have a chance after that. So you pretty much have 2 pieces and 3 pawns versus a rook and a king. I mean, anybody's going to win that. I mean, you could probably go to sleep and win it in your dreams. But yes, that was that game. So I thought it was a really exciting game. It's always interesting when you have people that are playing Armageddon and they start to run out of time and they start playing all crazy fast. And, you know, blunders are going to happen when that becomes the case because you just can't calculate and think that fast. So I appreciate everybody very much for coming by. Maraming salamat aking mga kaibigan. Nandri and tusen tak, and I will see everybody next time.